What happens when a duchess faces one of television's most unforgiving interviewers? What began as a lighthearted conversation about charity and purpose quickly unraveled into a televised showdown that left millions speechless. Meghan Markle entered the real-time studio poised and composed, and walked out minutes later under a cloud of tension. Two public figures, two powerful personalities, one stage. As tempers rose, so did the stakes. What began as conversation became confrontation. What began as civility became chaos. The Friday night taping of Real Time with Bill Maher started like any other. The studio hummed with anticipation. Producers whispered into headsets while the audience settled beneath the warm glow of stage lights. Bill stood just off camera, arms crossed, smiling like a man who already knew how the evening would end. The lineup was ambitious: a policy analyst, a conservative columnist, and closing the show, Meghan Markle. She was there to discuss her advocacy work, a new podcast, and her take on social media culture. Backstage, Meghan appeared calm and radiant in an elegant black pantsuit accented with gold jewelry, her hair softly waved, her reflection polished to perfection. At precisely 8 p.m., the cameras rolled. Bill finished his monologue, laughter fading into applause. Then came the introduction. "Please welcome Meghan Markle." The audience erupted. Meghan stepped onto the stage, composed and graceful, shaking Bill's hand before taking her seat opposite him. "Meghan," Bill began warmly, "it's not every day we have royalty in the studio. How's life outside the castle?" She smiled lightly. "Well, Bill, I wouldn't exactly call it a castle. But life is busy, purposeful." Bill's smirk deepened. "Let's talk about that purpose. You left the UK, the royal family, but somehow you're in the headlines more than ever. Netflix, Spotify, interviews, books. Do you miss palace life, or is this the life you've always wanted?" Her smile tightened. "I think it's important to move forward," she said coolly. "Harry and I have chosen to focus on meaningful work rather than titles." "Sure," Bill nodded, his grin sharpening. "But there's a difference between giving up titles and signing Hollywood contracts. Did you trade one spotlight for another?" A pause. "Just long enough to feel the shift. I think people are entitled to define their lives as they see fit, Bill," she replied, her tone sugar-coated steel. "Not everyone is content playing by old rules." The audience sensed it. This wasn't going to be another safe, polished interview. Bill pressed on, his questions edging closer to the line. "A lot of people wonder," he said, resting his chin on his hand, "did you really think you could marry into the royal family, challenge centuries of tradition, and not ruffle feathers? Or was ruffling feathers the point?" This time her practiced smile faltered. "I didn't marry Harry to ruffle feathers, Bill. I married him because I love him. I think that's something even you can understand." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. Bill grinned thinly. "And yet, here you are, out of the family but still in every headline. Is that love? Or branding?" Her expression hardened, the Duchess mask giving way to something sharper. "That's a remarkably cynical way to view marriage," she said evenly. "But then again—" She paused, a hint of a smile returning. "Cynicism is your brand, isn't it?" The audience gasped. Bill's smile froze, and just like that, the room changed. The warmth drained from the lights. Every question became a jab, every answer a counterpunch. What started as conversation had become combat, and the gloves were officially off. "Since we're talking about love and choices," Bill said, his tone deceptively casual, "let me ask you this. When you left the royal family, did you ever stop to think how that might feel to, the family? The Queen, William, Charles? Or was it just about you?" A collective wince rippled through the audience. Even the camera seemed to hesitate, zooming in closer on Meghan. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "Family is complicated," she replied evenly, her tone clipped but controlled. "Sometimes you have to make choices that protect your own mental health and well-being. I don't expect everyone to understand that, but I do expect respect for it." Bill's smirk was faint but unmistakable. Sure. Mental health. Very in vogue these days. But you see how it looks, right? You left the family, criticized them on TV, signed Netflix deals, and now you're here telling your side. That's not just self-care, that's image management. Which is fine, but let's not pretend it's a noble crusade. A low murmur spread through the audience, a mix of gasps and uneasy laughter. Meghan crossed her legs, leaning forward. I think it's telling, Bill, that you reduce everything I've been through to a crusade or a PR exercise. You don't seem to grasp the human cost of the choices I had to make. Oh, I grasp it, he shot back quickly. But you act like the cost was only yours. What about Harry's family? What about the British people? You think it was fair to paint them all as villains in your Hollywood redemption arc? Meghan's composure began to crack, her voice sharpening. Being honest about my experience doesn't make me responsible for other people's guilt or discomfort, she said firmly. Bill tilted his head. So, no responsibility at all for how messy things got? I take responsibility, she said, her words deliberate now, for choosing myself, for choosing my family, for refusing to stay in a system that was toxic. That's what I own. A small wave of applause broke out, polite, cautious. But Bill wasn't done. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Let's talk about Harry, he said. What do you say to people who think you pulled him away from his family? That you isolated him? That you, how do they put it, took him hostage? Meghan's eyes flashed, her disbelief turning to fire. I'd say those people clearly don't understand Harry at all. He's his own man. He made his own choices. Suggesting otherwise isn't just wrong, it's sexist. Sexist? Bill echoed, eyebrows raised. There it is. Yes, Bill, sexist. Her jaw tightened. You don't get to paint me as some manipulative woman who dragged her husband out of a castle because you can't imagine a man making his own decisions. The audience erupted in applause. Louder this time. Some cheering, some booing. Bill waited for the noise to die down, his smirk never wavering. Fair enough, he said at last. But if we're playing the honesty game, do you really think you can walk away from the monarchy and cash in on it at the same time? Or is that just hypocritical? Meghan laughed sharply. Not from humor, but disbelief. You're really obsessed with this idea that my life is one big transaction, aren't you? Bill tilted his head, voice low and cutting. I'm just saying, if it quacks like a duck, Duchess, the audience gasped. Meghan froze, then smiled. Slow, cold, deliberate. And I suppose you'd know all about ducks, Bill, she said smoothly. You certainly quack enough. The crowd exploded, half in laughter, half in shock. The tension was electric now. Bill's smirk faltered for just a heartbeat before returning, sharper than before. He leaned back, enjoying the chaos. Oh, we're just getting started, he murmured, his voice carrying across the studio. By now, the room was split, half rooting for Meghan, half for Bill. No one looked away. Every exchange was a duel, every word a weapon. Bill glanced down at his cue cards, then tossed them aside with a flick of his wrist. All right, Meghan, he said, drawing out the moment. Let's pivot. We've talked about royalty, duty, and drama. He paused, eyes glinting. But let's rewind to before you were Her Royal Highness. Meghan straightened slightly. If we must. Oh, we must, Bill replied with a grin. Let's talk suits. Let's talk about acting, Bill said, his tone deceptively light. The glamorous world of television. Some people argue you were never exactly a great actress, that your fame exploded not because of your roles, but because of who you married. How do you respond to that? The studio fell silent. The question hit like a slap. Meghan's eyes darkened, but her voice stayed steady. I respond by reminding people that I worked for over a decade in an industry that isn't exactly kind to women of color. I earned every role I got. I started at the bottom, briefcase girl on Deal or No Deal, and worked my way to a lead role on a successful series. Bill tilted his head. Sure, and Suits was cute, but let's be honest, it wasn't the crown. Meghan gave a short, incredulous laugh. Are you seriously comparing a legal drama to a period piece about your favorite outdated institution? Laughter rippled through the audience. Bill's smile didn't budge. Touché. But let's face it, your global fame didn't come from your IMDb page. It came from marrying into Buckingham Palace, and then acting shocked by the attention that followed. Meghan crossed her arms, her posture tightening. You keep implying I chased fame through marriage. Maybe I just fell in love with someone and didn't expect the world to turn me into a tabloid villain overnight. Bill shrugged. Okay, fair, but then riddle me this. If you loved acting so much, why haven't you done it since? Where's the follow-up role? The Oscar-worthy comeback? Or are you just too busy cashing Spotify checks? That one landed. Meghan's jaw clenched. You don't get to dictate what success looks like for me, Bill. Maybe I didn't want to go back to an industry that judged me for how I looked, how I spoke, or who I married. He leaned forward, tone razor-sharp. Or maybe the roles just weren't being offered. Maybe the phone stopped ringing because, let's be honest, Hollywood doesn't reward mediocrity twice. The silence was electric. Meghan inhaled slowly, her voice turning to ice. You know what I think? She said. I think you're just bitter that women like me, women who speak up, still refuse to play nice for men like you. You want a quiet, smiling duchess with no opinions? Too bad? Oh, please, Bill scoffed, waving a hand. Don't flatter yourself. I love opinionated women. What I don't love is narcissistic revisionism. You came here with talking points, a PR strategy, and a persecution complex. And you've been dodging accountability since the first question. Accountability? Meghan repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut. You think this is accountability? A smug man lecturing a woman about being grateful for being abused by the press, sidelined by her in-laws, and mocked for speaking her truth. Bill leaned in, unflinching. I think it's a conversation. You're the one turning it into a tantrum, the audience murmured. Discomfort, disbelief. A few gasps. I'm not throwing a tantrum, Meghan snapped. I'm standing up to condescension disguised as cleverness. Bill's grin widened. I'm not condescending, Meghan. I'm just not buying the Netflix version of events. She leaned forward, her hands gripping her knees. Then maybe you should stop pretending to be a comedian, she said, voice low and venomous, and admit what you really are. A bully with a monologue. The words hit like a blade. Bill's smile faltered. Just for a second, but the audience saw it. The tension was molten now, the air heavy with adrenaline. Bill leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen twice against the desk. Then he nodded slowly. You know, he said quietly, this was supposed to be a civil conversation. You could have said your piece, promoted your charity, defended your story. But you've been combative since the lights came on. Because your questions weren't questions, Meghan shot back. They were insults with punctuation. And your answers, Bill countered, have been narcissism with a side of victimhood. A beat of silence. Then Bill stood. The audience gasped. Enough, he said flatly. I've hosted this show for over 20 years. Presidents, dictators, comedians, actors, philosophers. And I've never asked a guest to leave. Meghan's eyes narrowed. But I'm making an exception tonight, Bill said, turning to the crew. We're done here. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Disbelief, shock. You're kicking me out? Meghan said, her voice cold, incredulous. Bill looked directly into the camera. To our viewers, he said calmly, I apologize. We'll return after the break with a real conversation. This isn't it, the audience erupted, half in outrage, half in applause. One host stood his ground. One guest refused to back down. And millions watching at home couldn't look away. And now, with millions watching, the final act began. What happens when civility ends, but the cameras keep rolling? This wasn't just television anymore. It was a reckoning. The silence in the studio crackled with static energy. Meghan Markle stood frozen, fists clenched at her sides. Across from her, Bill Maher remained upright, arms loosely crossed, his expression unreadable but composed. You're kicking me out? Meghan said, her voice tight with disbelief, simmering with restrained fury. Because I refused to smile through your disrespect? Bill shook his head slowly. No, Meghan, I'm asking you to leave because you're not interested in a conversation. You came here for a monologue, and that's not what this show is. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few uneasy chuckles fluttered and died. Meghan let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "You really think you can spin this as my fault, don't you?" Classic. A man invites a woman onto his platform just to tear her apart, and when she doesn't play along, he calls her the problem. "I didn't tear you apart," Bill replied evenly, though his tone had hardened. "I asked questions, the same ones the public's been asking for years, about the monarchy, about your choices, about your career, and every time, instead of answering, you attacked." Meghan took a step closer, her voice rising. "Don't you dare lecture me about attacks, Bill. Your entire career is built on belittling people and twisting their pain into punchlines. And now you want to act like you're some noble truth-teller?" Bill leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. "I am a truth-teller, and sometimes the truth hurts. You want everyone to see you as a victim of circumstance, Meghan. But maybe, just maybe, you're a victim of your own decisions." The line struck like a thunderclap. The air itself seemed to recoil. Meghan's face flushed deep crimson. "You arrogant, smug, sanctimonious—" She caught herself, straightened, lifted her chin. "You don't deserve my words." She turned sharply toward the audience, her heels clicking like gunfire. But she wasn't finished. "Not yet. You all see this, right?" She called out, her voice clear and cutting. "This is what happens when a woman refuses to sit quietly while being demeaned. They say she's emotional, difficult, unhinged, and then they tell her to leave." Bill raised a hand to interject, but Meghan didn't look his way. "No, Bill, you don't get the last word this time. You don't get to turn this into some heroic takedown of the big bad Duchess. You just exposed yourself." Their eyes locked, one final stare, sharp as glass. Then Meghan tore off her mic, dropped it on the desk with a loud clack, and said coolly, "You're welcome." She turned and walked off stage, posture rigid, steps deliberate and defiant. The audience sat frozen. The only sound was the echo of her heels fading into silence. Bill stood motionless for a long moment, hands braced on the desk, eyes fixed on the empty chair she'd left behind. Even he looked momentarily shaken. Then he exhaled, smoothed his tie, and faced the camera. "Well," he began, voice drier, quieter than usual, "that was something." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the room. "To our viewers," he continued, "we apologize. We invite guests here for honest conversation, even heated ones. But when someone refuses to engage in good faith and turns it into a shouting match, you have to draw the line." He straightened. "That line was tonight." Scattered applause broke out, hesitant, unsure. Bill raised a hand. "This is real time, not story time. You want a monologue? Start a podcast. You want a conversation? Sit down and talk. Meghan, wherever you are, good luck. Truly. But that kind of behavior doesn't fly here." He turned toward the crew. "We'll take a quick break, folks," he said, forcing a faint smirk. "When we come back, something a little less royal." The studio lights dimmed as the show cut to commercial, but the buzz in the audience was electric. Whispers hissing through the air as people tried to process what they'd just seen. Online, the moment had already escaped into the world. Clips trending, headlines writing themselves before Meghan even reached the door. Everyone watching knew they'd just witnessed it. One of the most explosive live interviews in television history.